Hey everyone, I am thrilled to have Tom Uebel with me, the co-founder and CEO of Commande E. We are huge users of Commande E over at Cloud App. And I was one of the Windows users that wasn't able to use the full product like all my friends on Mac. But recently this week, Tom and his company released Windows, and expanded some of the feature set of Commande E. Also had a nice fundraise. So I'm really excited to see the company growing and a really great product that can help you quickly search for anything that you want to find and increase your productivity. So we're excited to have Tom today, especially during this week when it's been wild and he carved out some time for us. So thanks for joining, Tom.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's been great. Cloud App was really one of the companies that I was a user of before Commande E was a thing, I think. And then Cloud App was one of the first companies that Commande E really started spreading within. So become good friends over email over the past few months. So
Definitely.
I'll be with you this morning.
Awesome. So give me a little bit of background on Commande E, kind of where the idea started. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what kind of led to this.
Yeah, definitely. So you have to go back probably 4 years or so ago. My co-founder Ben and I were on the engineering team at an early stage VC fund. And we kind of saw two things, and this was really kind of Ben putting the pieces together. One thing was we were engineers kind of flying around our hundreds of files in our code editors with no problem. And then some of our closest friends were spending their days between Salesforce and Gmail and just kind of tearing their hair out at the friction of moving between some of these systems. And these were some of our best friends, really, really smart people. So you kind of knew like the problem isn't the people, the tooling will be glued together super nicely. Sure. And so that kind of got Ben's head spinning as to, how could we make their day look a little more like ours? For all these touch points in the day where you kind of know exactly what you want to do next, it's, hey, I want to go to this Salesforce record. I want to go to this email thread. You know instantly what you need to do next, right? And so what we really want to do is just take that from the moment where you know what you want to do to you're actually there and executing on that task. Just take that, reduce the friction down to as little as possible. And one of the other things we saw on the team of 12 that we were a part of, we counted them up one day and there were 24 different cloud systems being used on that team. So you just have data everywhere. And I think that's pretty common. You can survey most teams. I think they'll tell you, yeah, the stuff I need to get my job done lives across so many different systems. And so we realized that you kind of needed this layer to pull them all together. And some of the technology underlying Commande E advanced in the past few years to make it possible in a way that really wasn't available before now.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty common kind of backstory, right? You like find a problem and you kind of hustle a little bit on the side to figure out how you can fix that problem, find the product market fit, and you're off to the races. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really fun. We definitely kind of took a lot of time in the garage to get it right. I think with productivity tools especially, there's a pretty high bar these days, and you want to make sure that when you kind of let something loose that you're giving people something really polished, really quality that kind of instantly they get it, and it just makes life easier.
Awesome. Yeah, we're kind of living in the age of like productivity apps and making things smoother, reducing friction, like you said. How do you kind of cut through the noise of that space as a brand and as a product, and really find a way to connect with customers and lead with kind of that in mind?
Yeah, I think both Cloud App and Commande E really were somewhat fortunate that it's very easy to describe what we do, right? It's, hey, all these touch points in the day where you feel like it takes too long to get to your next thing. You just hit Commande E, type what you want, and you're there. In Cloud App, it's, hey, I need to record this like piece of content and I want it to be just really good. How do I do this as kind of a layman? And so I think you need just like a very clear explanation of what it is. My co-founder Ben has talked about it as like being very atomizable. Like you can just very clearly say what something is, somebody gets it right away, and they can very easily say, oh yeah, I would love to use something like Commande to get to my Salesforce contact records. Just the use case is really apparent. And then I think the other piece is just the out of the box experience has to be really good. People have so much going on right now that, if they can't figure out how to pull this tool into their kind of workflow we try to keep it under 5 minutes. If you can't get up and running in under 15, I think it's going to be a really hard slog.
Yeah, I would agree. Especially, you mentioned during these kind of current times, there's even more noise where you have to break through not only the noise of other companies competing for time of products competing for time of a company, but also budget. So, you have to immediately sneak in and show immediate value and become a core piece of that group. Have you been able to kind of spread, like a land and expand type deal? Are you kind of seeing typical like organic word of mouth growth, or what else have you guys been able to do?
Yeah, so we're still pretty early on, and we kind of just started with a wait list that we built up while we were in private beta. And since we kind of took the covers off earlier this week, we've seen that kind of land and expand continue. It is the kind of thing where we've seen a lot of, people are on Zooms all day long now, and you're sharing your screen, you use Commande to get to something, and it just has this immediate effect of, whoa, how did you get to that thing in less than a second? That, I know it takes me 30 seconds to track down. And so once you kind of see it in action, it's the kind of thing you just kind of immediately want.
So you mentioned a few times, you're a big user of Cloud App. And we have a great, connection because we both love each other's products, which is great. How have you found that visuals and video from Cloud App has been helpful, communicating asynchronously, making your emails less big? How have those really helped create an experience both within your company and to customers?
Yeah, so I've had a couple different use cases. One is we kind of first started sharing what we were doing. I think it was back in early October, and we put out a post called, Meet Commande that kind of said, hey, here's this problem that we saw and how we're thinking about it. And like I said a second ago, the easiest way to explain it is to just show somebody it, right? Here's 20 seconds of me getting to 5 different things that I need to accomplish this task. And I was able to very easily make that video in Cloud App and distribute it. I'm an engineer. I have very little design sense or visual sense myself. And it's one of those products that just works right away and lets you produce something that makes you give the impression that you know what you're doing when I actually have no idea in that realm. So yeah, that's the biggest thing I think for us. And then also just I spend a lot of my day in email, very little in the code anymore. And a lot of it is kind of showing users, hey, here's how you do this thing in our product. And it is just so much nicer to send a quick GIF or something like that rather than, typing out 3 paragraphs of text.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I found, we're getting on the Cloud App soapbox here, but I found something similar, when I was at Adobe, leading a global team, and it was just a way to communicate, not have to be on, an early morning or late night call that nobody really wants to be a part of. You can just communicate asynchronously, and it's really helpful. You guys are just coming out of beta, you're getting a lot of feedback. You're doing probably a lot of user tests and really understanding how people are using it, developing, building out the use case profile. What is the way that you have kind of collected feedback to really try and create a customer experience as you're really kind of just launching?
Yeah, so we did a couple things. I think the first thing is you just have to show people that you care and that you actually do want the feedback. So, if you go into our app, we kind of have 3 main calls to action in the upper right. One is you can invite coworkers. Another is send us feedback. Then the last is just providing some customization so that you can make Commande, if it doesn't quite work out of the box exactly how you want it, you can kind of make it do what you want. And so just asking for feedback, I think, in the first place. And then second, I try to have a very quick SLA with our users. If you send us feedback, we try to get back to you really quickly. just to, again, reinforce that we care and we're going to incorporate what you tell us. And then the best is just circling back after the fact. So once somebody tells you, hey, I'd love this thing, closing the loop when you actually ship it, hopefully as quickly as possible.
I think that's, one of the last thing you said is probably maybe one of the most important, and maybe the one that doesn't always happen, is like, you got to close that loop so that you build that like trust, and people are like, hey, I made this suggestion like 6 months ago and they actually did it. Like, that's pretty cool. You create some loyalty that way.
Definitely. And we've been lucky. I think there's all these companies that you kind of survey the landscape and you come to admire the way some of them just conduct their business, both in terms of how they build product, but also how they communicate with their users. And Superhuman is a company that's really been an inspiration to us in that regard. It is that kind of thing where it can be 6 months ago where you might have even forgotten that you asked them for something, and they always close the loop and say, hey, here's that thing you were looking for. So
yeah, that's really cool. It's really helpful, I'm sure, to kind of build a community and loyalty. It's definitely a unique time going on right now. What are some things that you've been able to do as a leader to really stay connected with your team? You went through a fundraise, you launched a major product. How did you, I kind of just want to dig in and understand how you kind of made that happen, under the circumstances.
Yeah, it's been a fun few months. Yeah, it's interesting. I think honestly, a lot of it is just making sure you have the right people around the table. Fortunate to have worked with my co-founder for a few years before this. So, we've been through, major life events before. And the team we built, we made sure we got people that, cared about what we're doing, so that under tough times, you're still committed to that core mission. But also just making sure that you take care of your people in this time. I think we were pretty early, I think well before people started closing offices and people realized this was all going to be a thing. We'd kind of been monitoring it and told people hey, here's something we did was very early. We said, here's $100, please stockpile a couple weeks of groceries. It might get a little gnarly. But yeah, making sure that we have to be pushing pretty hard, obviously, but making sure that they take care of themselves also and don't kind of go too hard at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a big key piece. At Cloud App, we've been kind of monitoring the usage, mainly because I come from a data analyst background. So I'm just super interested by consumer behavior and understanding what's been going on. And as a key work tool, we've seen usage go up close to 3x, during the early morning commute time, what it used to be, and then also after hours. And my kind of hypothesis with that is I have 3 kids, so I'm trying to help homeschool, and my wife has stuff she has to get done, and so I'm taking breaks to go play with the kids or help with school. And so my work is 8 to 9, and then I have to take a break, and then it's 11 to 3, and then I have to take another break, and then it's 8 to 9 at night versus 9 to 5, and then a little bit at night. So it's been pretty interesting to see how people have broken up kind of this day, their work day, in actual data, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think I feel like most people have kind of adjusted to this new normal. Might not be ideal, obviously, but have kind of settled in to a certain extent. I think as we kind of get to this next phase where probably things don't look the same as they did before this, but what exactly it will look like, what kind of remains from this period, what looks different, I'm still not sure, and interested to see how it all shakes out. If 6 months down the line, how people work.
You mentioned kind of talking about experience and kind of building experiences with feedback. I want to hear you, Tom, as a consumer, you mentioned superhuman, but let's maybe get another example as well. What's a recent experience you had as a customer that really made you more loyal, and maybe some ideas that you pulled from that experience to help build Commande?
Trying to think. Honestly,
Could be retail, could be travel, could be SaaS, whatever.
yeah, I think a lot of it. That's a very good question. I think superhuman definitely stands out. One thing I've noticed is, there are some brands that you're starting to see this kind of like COVID messaging creep into everything. And at some point, it almost becomes a little much. And I think just I think different brands have handled it in different ways. And some brands, like there was one email that stood out. I think it was from somebody at HubSpot, and they just framed everything the right way, which like right off the bat was like, hey, totally understand this might not be top priority right now. If that's the case, let's connect in a few months. So I think just like retaining that human element and kind of really handling things the right way right now is kind of the main thing I'm looking for as a consumer.
Awesome. Yeah, I was fascinated for the first couple of weeks at just like how quickly things mobilized and innovated on more of the outside the digital realm. So like my local grocery store was, putting up massive guards and like had tape for like the 6 feet within like the first week. And then, local restaurants are like figuring out how to do curbside and like try and make it a good experience for people, even though that's not their core business. And it's been pretty cool to kind of see different innovation come from all of this.
Yeah, there is just the amount of ingenuity around it is really impressive. It does give you a lot of faith that, we're going to get through this.
Definitely.
Very adaptive. We're all going to be all right.
So I think this has been a fun conversation, Tom. I'm really glad I could get you on today, especially, during this week of craziness for you, which is really exciting. I want you to look inside the crystal ball and kind of help me understand what you think the modern workplace looks like and what's the future of experience business.
Yeah, I think it's just very highly personalized is kind of the main thing. It's one thing I am interested to see as you're starting to see more and more companies announce that, hey, you can work from home the rest of your career here if you want. It's going to be interesting to see, obviously people are going to have a little more customization of their workspace, but, what else, how much more demanding does the average consumer get when they kind of like are in more control of their day? If you think of how much time you spend at work, as more of that, I think becomes more to your own, you're left more to your own devices and able to take a little more control. It'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, it's kind of like I was reading something this morning about schools having like hybrid models and maybe more. You might have like more year-round type school systems where they have to spread it out to have smaller class sizes. And I mean, work could certainly be that way as well. I think I said this kind of when Twitter made their announcement. I think that's great that they're saying, hey, work from home. Probably, the stipulations are probably current employees, not necessarily hiring remotely. And then also, I think the next thing to drop is kind of building on your thought is hiring remote senior leaders. So I think once you see the Googles, Facebooks, Adobe is one as well, Microsoft hiring EVPs or even a C-level that is not at headquarters, I think that's when it's like, okay, now we've reached an actual remote work versus like, yeah, we'll hire, middle managers and they can be in Florida and we're in the Bay Area. That's fine, whatever. But, I need to have my direct reports, I need to have them here in HQ. So I think that'll be interesting to see if that starts to develop as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Will be very interesting to follow over the next year or so.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tom. This has been really fun. I appreciate your time, and everyone go check out Command E. It's such a great product. I had a lot of Command E envy, and I'm excited to get the full app on Windows. So thanks again, Tom, and I look forward to talking again soon.
Definitely. Thanks, Joe.